Okay, so in the truest sense, I want to start this video off by giving a brief disclaimer. That disclaimer is going to be, okay, first of all, can my phone not die while we make the video? But I want to talk about how education is such a privilege, right? And if I say something in this video that doesn't really make sense, or if I say something and I misspeak or misuse a word, bear with me. You know, I'm not that smart. So just don't think too much about it. Okay, this isn't going to be a video essay or a scholarly essay. This is more so going to be me coming on sharing the little that I do know, and more so like shining a light. I think that there's a sense of solace for myself, at least when I share experiences and kind of shine light on some really crappy features. Now, this isn't going to be a sap video. It's really not going to be a deep video, just a general observation, and that's typically what I come on here to do. If you've noticed any of my other videos. So I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm realizing how education is such a privilege, right? I think when we talk about school and things like that, we're often debunking it. And I'm wondering, for African Americans, at least for us, do we have to simply debunk education, right? And the value of it, make sure my mic is on, and the value of it, because we are simply left out of these communities, right? We're not really afforded the opportunity to go to college or the opportunity to go to school. And you know, for a lot of people, it's so funny because I think when we start talking about privilege, I think that the white experience is so unique. A lot of people want to shy away from race. And because of white supremacy, we never peer into the difference in like white culture and just how this culture is so privileged. I think that what social media has did was it's kind of made all of us assimilate, not to European standards, but it's made us assimilate to really feel ashamed of like where we live. And I think that it has been a driving force and tactic for our consumerism as African Americans. And I also think it's something that really keeps us bound. I realize that being a poor Black person, materialism isn't really a value, but it's more so like a politic. I know that if I go a certain place, I'm going to get a certain benefit. Now, you could say that this goes across the board for everybody, but it's really not true, right? White people have the ability to build generational wealth. White college students can just wear the same hoodie and the same shoes every single day, and they can still get the same opportunities. They can go and wear a busted suit. They can drive a Toyota for the rest of their lives, and they're never going to be deprived of opportunities such as love. They're never going to be deprived of respect or, you know, even seen as like general competency. Whereas a Black person, you don't have that privilege. You better be tip top because you're already starting from like a negative politic. And so it's like that, then there's just like layers. Like, so I realized that our drive for consumerism and our quote unquote over prioritization of materialism is something that it's kind of like embedded within the culture, and it's almost like a means of survival, which brings me to my second point. I realize that as a Black person, a lot of people are like, we can all just go to school, we can all just get up out the hood, and we can all just, you know, go and do all these different things. But I realize that that is literally not possible for so many of us. Okay, sure, there are some people who have early pregnancies, and we know that, yes, that has have an impact on a person's earning potential or even like their intellect. But I realize that it's not really like these little quick superficial things. I think the reason why people advocate so hard and like why people are not going to stop talking about race and why we have to continue the conversations, because for so many people, especially white America and like those conservatives who kind of like believe that, you know, it really is just like an individual thing, like poverty is just an individual choice. And you also have to understand too, like, let's redefine poverty. What does it mean to be poor, right? Like, let's really talk about that, because I think a lot of times people are like, homelessness, right? And even though homelessness is a really huge indicator of poverty, it's not just homelessness. It's not just basic needs. You're talking about not really being able to self-actualize, right? Like, I know so many people who've never been afforded the opportunity to either go to school, learn that new craft, right? Even for myself, you know, setting aside time on my lunch break just to create a video, right? You can say, okay, yeah, well, you didn't make certain opportunities, but at the same time, you have to understand too, the influence is so different for African Americans. Like, so many of us are really just caught in this rut of like paying bills. And I understand that now we're at this place where capitalism is starting to impact white people, right? That generational wealth is kind of drying up. You know what I mean? There are a lot of people who weren't left with trust funds, and now we're getting more rev in regards to conversations about poverty. But this is something that has always persisted within the Black community. And this is why I always call white people out on this false sense of allegiance, because I really just feel like it isn't until it starts hitting their communities and impacting their lives that there needs to be, you know what I mean, like this whole movement. And I don't mean to be dichotomous in thinking, and I don't mean to, you know, sow seeds of discourse and division, because I understand that there are some people who are, you know, of other races and poor. And like, you know, we're all here under the umbrella of America. You know, we're all here left at the whims of politicians and crooked, you know, people in positions of power who have the choice to say do or no. But a lot of times for so many of us, that privilege is not afforded to Black people. And when this all passes, right, when white people get the laws, when they vote the Republican, whatever the case may be, right, like they're going to get theirs and we're going to still be left here in this spot. And I think I'm more so just come on to kind of like talk about how we have to do something in terms of how we perceive one another. I don't really think the changes that we need to necessarily make are going to be structural, not just yet. And I say that because right now I realize that we are really battling against ideas and like paradigms, you know, and I realize that because education is something that is not afforded to so many of us, there has to be another solution. It can't simply be, okay, we're going to go and like start with the laws, because you have to understand these are structures and systems that like it's going to take a while. And I think that this is a great place to start. I'm not saying that we should just simply forego them, right? Like we clearly see with Claudine Gay and so forth, like this is something that is, this is pretty big. Like, you know, like this is deeply, deeply embedded in the roots of America and American society and American institutions. But I do think that we have to kind of start to have a conversation within our community amongst one another about, you know, conversations like materialism, and not in the sense of, you know, consumerism, but in the sense of how can we see one another? I've heard a lot of people talking about debunking Black excellence, right? Talking about how Black people should have a sense of, you know, purpose in this life without, you know, necessarily feeling the need to achieve. I think that this is what people don't understand who argue that, right? People who stand on that side of it, you don't realize that it's not that we're debunking Black excellence. It's not that we're saying Black people have to live exceptional lives, but you have to understand that so many of us have never even had an opportunity to tap into our exceptionalism, right? So Black excellence is a little bit more than just striving to beat the status quo. It's a little bit more than just being someone who feels like you have to go and validate yourself. Although we know that, you know, people who strive to be better do typically have inferiority complexes. It's more so just to say, like, listen, this is a space in which we have not occupied, and it really does take all of your bootstraps. And, you know, it takes so much for us to even get into that space to where we can even have an opportunity to be excellent. Because for so many of us, that's an opportunity that's not afforded to us. I'm sitting here thinking about, you know, being in this space of like poverty, and I'm not poor. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm poor, because I think that for me, I have a roof over my head. Like, I'm not poor. You know what I mean? I'm not poor as I could be, you know, and quite frankly, I think for a lot of people in my 20s, you know, Gen Zers, you know, I'm kind of like borderline Gen Z and millennial, but anyway, I think that we have to kind of be mindful when we throw certain things around, even just in terms of like weaponizing, you know, psychological terms, but also in terms of like poverty and things like that, because I think sometimes we feel like, one, first of all, we're 20s, right? We're in our 20s. I don't really think anybody in their 20s is rich. So we also have to understand too how social media has kind of transformed that standard to put 20-year-olds in a position where they feel like they should be millionaires, which is very unrealistic because of your age as well as your skill set. You're not that good at anything in your 20s. I mean, unless you had like a really great opportunity and like, you know, you had great upbringing at like 10 and you started working when you were like 6, then yeah, but like for so many people that's not the case, so like that's very unrealistic. But you know, so I'm just saying that, but I'm just saying overall I think we have to really take a look at how we communicate with one another. I think we have to take a look at how we view one another. You know, people who may embody certain things that may not be quote unquote American or conservative, right? In terms of like the Black community, I think we also have to take a look at how, you know, for so many of us, just because we don't maybe have like scholarly terminology, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not educated. That doesn't mean that we don't know what's going on. I mean, quite frankly, you know, that sounds like a general thing, like, yeah, all Black people aren't X, Y, and Z. But I do think a lot of times it is one of those things where we kind of have this attitude of like, oh, just because a Black person looks this way, then they're not educated. They don't know what's going on. They made bad choices. And it's like, that's not the case at all. So this thing is so big. It's like such a big cobweb, and it just has such a ripple effect, and it affects everybody. And yeah, like that's pretty huge. And so I think that we're at this place now where I also feel like too, this is a question I would kind of like to pose in regards to, you know, white people. It's like, in what ways is white culture being influenced to kind of like assimilate and adapt to, or rather possess, right, uphold, or ingest the struggles of other minorities, and they're not really able to differentiate between what their struggle is, what their plight is, versus the black people, right? I think that sometimes this is kind of what happens when you just kind of have this like huge conglomerate of like voices, and there's all these different paradigms and ideas, and you have social media and it's the websites, and you're hearing something repetitiously. You can kind of go through like cognitive dissonance when you don't really know what's your experience and what isn't. And this is kind of true too for like weaponized or misuse of psychological Western psychology, right? In terms of terminology, like somebody be like, oh, that was traumatic, when it really wasn't traumatic. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I think that in part, a lot of people, white Americans specifically, are picking up the plight of people, you know, black people and other minorities, but you know, black people. And I don't think that they're really kind of able to see that this isn't your plight. This isn't your struggle. This is not your reality. But I think when you hear something so much, it feels purposeful. You kind of garner a sense of momentum. You kind of want to start to advocate and fight for that. And advocacy is a beautiful thing. Like, this isn't to say that, you know, white people don't have struggles, or, you know what I mean? But I do think a lot of people are starting to, you know, take the black plight and like adopt it as their own identity. And I think that there's a sense of cognitive dissonance there, because it's like, this isn't your story. This is, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't your life. Like, you don't have these problems, you know? And I think it feels purposeful, like I said, for a lot of people, especially if you grew up in privilege. You know, a lot of people talk about the ghettos. There's a lot of negatives here. I'm not going to try to put a spin on poverty, but just to kind of shine a little light. The beautiful thing, or at least what God makes beautiful about the thing, right, is like when you're impoverished, you build character. You know, when you have hardships, you build character. I think that obviously in a privileged society such as like white America, you don't really have to go through the nitty gritty. You kind of just get like mentorship. You know, it's more of a pass down, handout, protege type of situation. Whereas a black person, you're a lot of times having to be like tooth and nail. And then we know in deprivation, creativity is birth. That's why black people are very creative. It's not to say white people aren't creative, but there's a little context there. That may be a general statement, but there's some truth. So yeah, a lot of times you're questioning, you know, and I think for so many of us, it's like, do I pay my bills? Do I invest in art utensils? You know, and I don't necessarily feel like that's just the 20s. You know, I think that that's just the reality for so many of us. And so I think a lot of people, especially today, are like motivational speakers. I critique them so heavily sometimes, but it's like, you know, people come out and they're like, oh, you need to just start that business. You know, you need money to start the business, you know, or you need to just do that. You need to just, you know what I mean? And it's like, for so many black Americans, I just think that's so crippling. And I think for myself, realizing how for black people specifically, you know, we can't really identify with anything such as like godliness, genius, or gifted, right? Like, we don't really get that opportunity. Like, we just get deprivation, we get poverty, we get all these different things. And people typically have a way of esteeming or rising to the occasion, or, you know, more so bringing into fruition the expectations that people place on them. And so when you're never told that you are gifted, you are, you know what I mean, then it's going to be really hard to kind of manifest your potential and actually self-actualize. And so I think what we have today is a lot of grievance within the black community. And I just think, again, like I said, in terms of people taking on the black plight, you know what I mean? It feels like a noble thing to do. And a lot of people want to be heard, you know, especially white Americans, like, you know, they want to be heard. It's a thing, but it's like, it's not really a thing. And like I said, I don't think that, you know, this isn't to generalize. We know that everybody has struggles, but I'm noticing that. And so I just wanted to say it's a different struggle. And I just wanted to say that education is definitely something that is, it's a privilege to really be educated and, you know, articulate yourself or whatever. I mean, I even think about all these books that I have to read, you know what I mean? But it's like, I'm working, I'm trying to better my situation so that I can, you know what I mean, possibly have a more fruitful future. And it's like, there's a lot of times sacrifices on that end. I think even in terms of black women in our relationships, you know, people think that it's always just a matter of like, oh, we just don't want men. We want to forego men. We're feminists, you know, and that may be the case for some people, but for a lot of us, it's like, I have to survive. You know what I mean? So a lot of times that doesn't look like a negligence in regards to our relationship or our desires for marriage with a black man, you know. A lot of times that's just like, these were the sacrifices I had to make to survive, you know, and that's really sad because it's like, it's like you have to put your womanhood, your motherhood on the line, you know what I mean, to literally just survive and get out of your situations. And I think because we have glamorized poverty so much. This is why I personally critique rappers and entertainers and things like that. And people are, I'm reading, where's that book at? Oh, it's on my bed. But, and, in the book, he just kind of talks about like, rap not really having an impact on the community. I get so angry with these arguments because it makes me want to just like, you know what I mean? Like, I just get so mad, like, because this is like, are you not in the community? Like, where do you live? Where did you grow up? You know what I mean? Because it's like you're saying that it doesn't impact us, but it does. But it does though. But it does. And it's like, rappers want to come out when they're late 40s and 50s when they didn't already cause all this destruction and normalize everything we're trying to fight against. I think that's the thing that bothers me, right? It's like you have people who are advocating for the ghetto, saying that we should stay in the ghetto, or, saying that what we doing in the ghetto is okay. Like, you know what I mean? We're out here trying to survive. You know what I mean? And it's like you got people who living in the ghettos want to get out of the ghetto. So it's just like, I get so confused, in that, and I'm moving kind of in a different direction, but y'all know how the videos goes. But it's like, I get so confused with people who have that mentality, who come and start advocating, on behalf of the people who are impoverished, on behalf of, talking about anti-blackness, when it's like, we're trying to get it better here. What are you talking? We're trying to be like you. You know what I mean? So it's just like, that's the thing that bothers me. But I more so say that to say, people glamorize the ghettos. People glamorize the struggle, but it's nothing glamorous about it. You know what I mean? Like, not having any money to, take care of yourself and buy yourself even skincare. You know what I mean? Buy yourself clean water. You know what I mean? Water bottles, case of water, $6. You know what I mean? Like, and depending on where you live, that's different, And so I just think that for myself, I think God has me in a very interesting season right now, and I'm very grateful for everything. I look at this and I don't look like what I'm going through, and I truly believe that is nothing but favor. I can't sit here and act like there's not something going on there, And we can talk about, Black people in faith, but I realized that because someone posed the question once, it was on a podcast, they posed the question of whether or not Black people had a choice in terms of faith, right? They posed the question of like, when it comes to African Americans, do we need faith to survive, right? Like, to survive the horrendous things that happen to us in America, past tense and even, moving current. I was reading a book. I was reading Poverty, Race for Profit. And I had woke up in the middle of the night and I was just like, oh my God, like if someone, it was like after reading African American history, it was so crazy. I woke up and I was just like, I thought somebody was, breaking in my place, right? It was weird. I think from reading the book, I kind of had like a inner outer experience. I don't know what to call it. I wouldn't say lucid dreaming or anything like that, but, it was like, I felt like what it would feel like, to be like your ancestors, right? Being in a space where it's like you're laying somewhere, you're trying to sleep and it's not safe. And at any given moment, someone can just come and like violate you, like it just was so crazy. And not violate in terms of like abuse, but like more so in the sense of just that lack of safety. And there's been so many studies that have been done on this, right? Like people who have had, traumatic experiences from ancestral, you know what I mean? How that impacts the bloodline and how that affects the DNA. But they never really admit it in regards to African Americans. And so nobody's ever going to be quiet about this, right? I'm not going to be quiet about it. I don't think any other person who stands for Black people and Black community and Black issue will ever be quiet about it because, it's like people refuse to look at it in the mirror. Everybody wants to just kind of sweep it under the rug. Everybody wants to act like we're all, you know what I mean? And it's so fake. And I want you to know right now, Jesus cares about justice, okay? And I think that it's time for, if we're going to do this sense of allegiance, you got to stop trying to do the white fragility thing. You can't, like, I think at some point as a person, you have to want to like grow up. But I realize that this tactic is not something I want to even take or even something I necessarily advocate for. This constant screaming match, you know what I mean? Black people, white people telling us that we need to work hard. Like, I just don't really care to do that, So my whole premise is just realizing how we have to find other ways to give to our communities, okay? We have to find other ways to give. And I do think that a really, really impactful and helpful and large part of that is going to be through wisdom. I think that's going to be, if you are someone who's educated, right, through sharing that, if you, have means to have books, like, give some books away, you know what I mean? That's going to be the medium. That's going to be the channel, because I just think that where we are right now, you know what's up. So that's the end of the video. I'm all talked out. My lunch break is almost over. I'm grateful that, I'm like, so I have a lot to be grateful for. And I think that that's one thing that I sat down and I just did, when I was having like a moment today. I'm like, man, you really just have to sit back and be grateful for everything that is in your life. Like literally when everything is going wrong or one portion of your life is going wrong, and even if it's going like extremely wrong, like really bad, you have to really step back and like give thanks for everything. And I don't know your faith, wherever, how that works. You're really gonna have to like put your trust in something else, because I really feel like when it comes to life, it's just always moving. There's always motion, and nobody really knows, but it's true. You really can't lose it all tomorrow. And I actually tried to share this testimony with this white guy, and he just was like, it was just completely over his head. And obviously, some people don't have that wisdom, and that's fine, But I realized for white America, the chances of them losing it all is very unlikely. Not impossible, not impossible, but a lot of times, they're backed by resources. We know that white Americans make more on the job than black Americans. And I just think it's, again, these conversations are so unfortunate, because I think what people want to do, white, black, whoever, we want to kind of silo this ugly truth. We wouldn't want to silo it. We kind of want to be like, oh no, don't say that. We can work just twice as hard and we can get in that position and so forth. And I think the more and more that we actually achieve this identity politic in terms of, materialism, right? And it's in our desired aesthetic, right? Because we've been deprived of so much. I think the less and less we have kind of like that, and that's challenging. I don't really know how to say the things that I've said in a polite way. I do think that everything isn't for everybody, and I do think that I don't see how you cannot see, like, like it's not really wrong. That's not like, you know what I mean? Like that's just real, to be honest. Yeah, so I don't know. I think that it's unfortunate that we can never really talk about the ugliness, because I think what's happening is that we're sweeping it under the rug, but I also think that it's like being programmed in our minds to act like it doesn't exist. And so I don't really know what we're going to do and what the new narrative will be, right? This is my entire like call out message to tell you that, hey, we have, at this point, we need to start engaging in ideas. We need to start engaging in philosophy. Like, obviously Jordan Peterson is significantly older than me, and he's also a white male. So, layers. But it's like when you start talking about intellectualism and philosophy, a lot of times African Americans are not in that space. And we know historically they've been completely erased from that space. And we have to literally pay a nice portion, a nice penny to find the books, to find them, I think one thing that will always trip me up about education is how we've been deprived, not just in terms of institutionalized education, but even of our history. The extent that white America has gone, that is in this place where we have no idea. We have no clue. We have to literally go for Amazon to recommendations to literally find answers to who we are and what has taken place and what we've done and who we can become and how did, our ancestors get out of certain situations. How did they defeat this? Is crazy to me. That is crazy to me. Like that's the thing. And that's the really, really ugly truth. And this is why I just think it's so important for us to like stay focused and then really engage in ideas, because a lot of people are telling our story now. Like a lot of people telling our story now. In Matthew Desmond's book, Poverty, he literally talks about how the average white family makes $120,000, whereas the black family makes 54. I don't even think, it might have been 45. I'm dyslexic. Right? And it's like, when you even talk about that, like in Matthew Desmond's book as well, he talks about how white poverty is not the same as black poverty. White people still have better advantages and better opportunities, right? So it's like, don't sit here and don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. I think that there's this desire to just dip in black culture and always take. And it's because nobody really knows, right? Like, where is that, right? We exist in all different diasporas, so nobody really knows the black culture. What is, you know what I mean? Nobody really knows that, right? We've been literally intentionally deprived. I don't know. Let me say that, I don't know. But it's like, I don't know too many cultures in the world. Let me not say that. But when you just think about Black America, okay, to literally be deprived of the ability to read, to be deprived of economic and educational opportunities, to be deprived, to be regulated solely as a worker, to literally be deprived of your ancestry, books burned, books banned, modern age. That is crazy. That is crazy. And to think that it's over, to think that because you see some Instagram influencers buying some Chanel from DH Gate is crazy. It's crazy. And the way the system is set up is so intentional about plucking our fruit and getting us so early on to where it's like, yeah, we got entertainers and we got athletes and stuff who are in position, but it's like they don't know. A lot of people don't know. And so by the time you come into that, yeah, you're in your 40s and the damage is already done. You already told our brothers and our young sisters to kill themselves and get pregnant with whoever and do whatever. Now you wake up and had a revelation. Oh, I was being used. Oh, that wasn't right. I probably shouldn't have wrote about that. Well, thanks, bucko, but the damage is already done. And it's the same with the people who are in other positions. By the time you wake up and realize, you know what, I probably shouldn't have bought that Ferrari. I probably should have figured out how to, create something to give back or to do something that was philanthropical for my community. The money's gone. So congrats to you and your Ferraris. You deserved it. You worked hard for it, Hey, you deserved it. But y'all gotta stop running back to the Black community when you finally get the revelation.